Nearly 16 hours in first class and on the A380 by Qatar Airways no less. What's not to like? In a moment I'll board and get to the huge throne-like seating, the in-flight onboard lounge where you can rub shoulders with those slumming it in business class, the banquet-like 5-star 8-course restaurant dining, and the wine cellar where I'm just simply forced to try every drop. But right now I'm in Doha. Again. For about the 4th time in 3 months, looking at giant wooden statues and trying to find a refuge away from the thronged and starving hordes in the middle of the night. The only possible escape from the endless duty-free shop selling gold bars was to wave a first-class boarding card at the flunky at the bottom of an escalator and ascend to that pillar of aviation in the sky, the famous, glorious Al Safwa First Class Lounge, which will be my home for the next 4.5 hours. The monumental brutalist architecture is designed to be both awe-inspiring and show just what a small little cog you are in the first-class machine that's Qatar. But the Al Safwa lounge is eerily quiet. Even far away you can hear the soft trickle of the lounge's signature feature, a floor-to-ceiling fountain in which water falls down a glass tube into a massive metallic dish. As your feet echo along the 50 feet wide corridors without a single person, it's almost as if you've ascended to meet your maker. There's another water feature resembling a river flowing down to the depths of the underworld. I did for a moment wonder if it had joined the River Styx while you wait your redemption, or at least a redemption ticket on frequent flyer miles to get in here. The Qatar Airways First Class Lounge is one of the best lounges on the planet. Unbelievably exclusive, very hard to access, huge, awe-inspiring, and one of the few places in the world that makes you imagine you're in a museum, not an airport lounge. There is of course a great restaurant, but add in the hotel-like bedrooms, art gallery, bar with it, ultra-exclusive champagne, and yes, even its own duty-free shop. It's like a lounge like no other. It's rather like Vanity Fair, and I mean that in the modern first half of the 19th century connotation, not that of the Pilgrim's Progress. Although, since I seem to be on my own version of Pilgrim's Progress around the globe, my allegory is indeed of stopping off on a journey from my hometown to a place of deliverance where a weary traveller can get rest and an ale, which in this case is a first-class airline lounge with a 5-star restaurant attached. Oh, that is superb. So here we are in the first class lounge at Doha Airport for Qatar Airways. It is a fantastic lounge. I can't express just how good it is. Huge, monumental, even if it's just a little bit sterile. I really don't want to leave, but unfortunately I've got to, because my first class flight to Sydney awaits. Almost time to leave that free-flowing bottle of Laurent Perrier champagne, available in buckets at your seat if you choose. You don't get that in the cheap seats in business. However, even those seats are a bit odd, in small walled cubicles. Now, the centrepiece of the gigantic lounge is this gigantic fountain, but the nearest seats are miles away. Well, I exaggerate for dramatic effect, they're only about 50 feet away. The other oddity is the lounge isn't that comfortable, to the stage of seeming to sit on rather random armchairs in the middle of a aircraft hangar. At the exit, there's that most typically loungy area of the lounge looking rather out of place with just some odd armchairs. Odd, innit? Well, the sheer size of the place is like nothing I've ever seen before, and if no more first-class redemptions come up, I'll never see again. Now, Qatar are a bit cheap in that they don't offer car service for passengers to take them to their aircraft, unlike other Gulf carriers, but as I left, the staff told me I could board at my leisure, so I took the monorail to find another lounge and another bar since the new North Plaza had just opened, and in this case I went to the brand new Al Marjan Business Class Lounge North. It may not look much like it, but this is actually a pop-up lounge covering for the much larger Business Class Lounge North, which will open in the Hanging Gardens when they're fully grown, overlooking yet more Toblerones in the duty-free area. At that stage, this lounge will turn into the Gold and Platinum Lounge North, just for elite tier frequent flyers who make the dubious decision to travel in steerage. Yeah, I do hope you're keeping up. Anyway, I had another hour awaiting my redemption, mixing with the plebeians in business class before being ferried over the underground river, which I had to cross to get to my aircraft, where the patricians are, if again you'll forgive the reference to ancient history. Not that there were any. In this new My Novel Without a Hero, the hero gives up and heads for a really rather pleasant glass of Chardonnay, a welcome cocktail, and a wander around the deserted desert lands in the hope of finding, well, another passenger. Although some of the chaps in here really weren't quite top drawer. Chap at the table next to me was wearing suede shoes, and then I overheard somebody splitting an infinitive, and the staff refused to eject them. There are 2 large restaurants, comfortable snooze and TV areas, and a flunky who slowly walked up to me, suggesting that if I cared to board, my aircraft was waiting for me. So a pleasant stroll to walk off many, many bottles of champagne, just as the last and final call was being called, and up the dedicated escalators for first class. The giant A380 is shuttling once again between Doha, Sydney and indeed London, really the routes it was designed for. Now, Qatar said it would never fly this aircraft again, as demand for aviation was so suppressed a few years ago, but a surge post-COVID means that the airline hurriedly reactivated the super jumbo fleet as a stopgap measure when it was clear the airline just didn't have enough aircraft to cope, and the double-deckers are now out of enforced retirement to cope with the increase in travel. Now, boarding for first and business class passengers was completed through the front upper deck of the behemoth aircraft. Sorting the wheat from the chaff, business had to turn right, first class turned left. However, the crew were frantically finishing setting up and not expecting passengers, much to the flustered-looking cabin manager's dismay. But I turned left towards the first class cabin, and there we have it, my cosy seat for the next 16 hours. The first class cabin has just 8 seats in a 1-2-1 configuration with deep purple and wood finishes, making for a feeling of understated luxury, dated though it is. Next to the seat are 3 small compartments. One to my right house the touchscreen controls for the seat position control, and they've got enough space for a laptop in there as well. Compartment to my left at the top has a magazine pocket, while below it contains a small water bottle and the remote control for the in-flight entertainment system. The coveted seat 1A turns into a fully flat position bed which measures 81 inches long, that's 6 feet 9 inches, and provides a very generous 23 inches of width. I decided I might just survive. Seats in the middle are similar, with a huge privacy divider. At each seat you can dine opposite another passenger if you really want to invite anybody from the cheap seats to join you. Although at this level of elite flying, another passenger is hassle indeed. Right at the front of the cabin was a vast light and a set of stairs that led to the front of the economy cabin. Well, walking up those stairs while boarding would certainly add to the wow factor for first class passengers, but Qatar now avoid it as you walk through the now closed and abandoned first class lounge. These shelves used to have the first class bar and snacks. All gone now as Qatar operates first class light. Some really frequent first-class flyers would find the privacy of this cabin slightly lacking, and I can understand why. From my seat, I could see across the aisle to the seat opposite, if I leant around the huge divider that is. At least there's a vast 26-inch TV screen. So there's first, with the comfy long sofas, chaos in the galley, then the retro-looking Qatar A380 business class cabin. There are vastly better seats on the latest Qatar 777 with a new Q seat with sliding doors, whereas the A380 seat is a little bit more conventional, but still pretty good. The Qatar Airways A380 business class cabin is located on the upper deck, 48 seats, 1-2-1 reverse herringbone layout. A close look at the seat shows it's got direct access to the aisles. It converts into an 80-inch fully flat bed with your feet tucking into a small tunnel ahead of you. Behind the single large business class cabin is a lounge, and behind this a tiny economy class cabin. Pretty crammed, the seats have got a 17-inch screen with a side armrest which is lower to give more space to the seat, and it's also got a flip top to open up into a useful side bin where the headphones are. Bathrooms forward, then there's yet more chaos in the galley, and a quiet calmness in first. Indeed, note the lack of overhead bins. Every seat has a wardrobe instead. For a retro first-class seat that was abandoned a few years ago and sent to a junkyard in the desert, it really is one of the best ways to get around the globe.
Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft bound for Sydney is now ready for departure and all customer has boarded. We would like to request for our customer to take your assigned seats now. Cabin crew to close all overhead bins and ground staff to leave the aircraft now.
Now, first class on Qatar is a bit odd because Qatar is trying hard to eradicate the class as part of its lineup. Indeed, it got the chop back in 2020. It's back now, but in a half-hearted way, as Qatar says there's no point because, in an egalitarian move, they argue that business class is good enough for everybody.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our privilege club and our wall of frequent flyer members. As we prepare to depart for safety, please ensure that your hand luggage has been placed in the overhead storage compartment or under the seats in front of you. We also ask you to switch your electronic device and mobile phone to flight mode and continue to observe the fasten seatbelt sign. Smoking, including the use of light gel matches and e-cigarette, is not permitted on board, including in the washroom. In the meantime, immerse yourself in RX1 in-flight entertainment system. Continue to stay connected after takeoff using your personal device with our Wi-Fi sponsored by Orido. Digital food and beverage menu are available for our economy customers and can be accessed from the Wi-Fi login page.
I say, tally-ho, we're off, and pretty sprightly for a bird that spent years closed up and abandoned. Listen to those Engine Alliance GP7000 engines, a joint venture between General Electric and Pratt & Whitney. And there we go, up and away out of Doha, heading to India, just skimming Sri Lanka before making Western Australia near Broome and on to Sydney in just over 15 hours. Now, even before the seatbelt signs were off, I went straight onto the first volume of the wine list, and please excuse me while I drop dead at the quality and prices of the fine drops on here. Only 2 champagnes served in Qatar first class, the Papayed Sec Rare Millesime 2006, which retails north of $600 or 300 quid from Selfridges. It's a structured, full-bodied and bursting with fruit champagne. Or there's the Alexandre Laurent Perrier Rosé 2006, that's only 250 quid down Claridge's, but it's produced in very small quantities and is an outstanding, subtly powerful wine, very rare and indeed much sought after. Still a bit bored with life up the pointy end, I decided to live a little and visit the little pub in the back room and see what nibbles the proletariat nibble at in the stalls. The canapes aren't bad and the cocktail list is amazing. I started off with a good Hampshire gin, the Bombay Sapphire Premier Cru and Tonic, and a little bit of, well, I think it might have been pork or pheasant in a glass with beetroot. Fruit available too, if you like that kind of thing, and not a single passenger from business who all seemed to be agog with indifference at the fact that they were flying in a Pantechnicon with a pub attached. So, having left the sunny shores of Doha behind, I started to feel in need of sleep, as much sleep as a tired newt in fact. So press the button for controlling the blinds on the 3 windows, and asked the butler to wake me for dinner when we were nearing something like Bombay. After all, that was my snooze nightcap. 4 hours snooze later, and with India dead ahead, I awoke with hair like an out-of-work hedgehog, and I needed to freshen up before dressing for dinner. After the crew brought me a gin fizz cocktail to maintain an optimum level of perkiness, of course. Now, I had a wander into the bathroom, which is amazing. As big as a cabin on any other aircraft. Sadly, Qatar haven't fitted showers in first, unlike their competitors, so I've really got to mark them down for that. That really is very poor form. but nevertheless there is enough room for a sleep in here, next to the rare orchid garden in the bathroom and even a hotel bathroom style taps. I also finally received the amenity kit I asked for twice, and the crew forgot it. Twice. Alas, it's the same as you get in business. Nothing special in first at all here. It's created by the French perfume house Diptyque, and it features a range of skincare products including lip balm, a hydrating facial mist, and Diptyque essential face cream with a heart of roses, voluptuous notes of prickly pear, and the freshness of lemon petitgrain. The kits also include more mundane socks, eye shades, and earplugs. Also got the cat out of the bag, or rather the headphones. Now, a bit of a disappointment to find they're exactly the same as you get in business class. The only exception is they come in a lovely silk bag. Pretty high quality with acceptable noise reduction, although at the front of the A380, the cabin's so quiet anyway, you really could literally hear a metaphorical pin drop. I was lucky I had a 2-meter charging cable with me, as the closest charging port was located way in front of me next to the in-flight entertainment screen. Before takeoff, each first-class passenger also received a voucher with a code with completely free Wi-Fi for the duration of the flight. However, the speeds were equivalent to dial-up and only just about acceptable. Now, is it common to feel a certain frisson or even a full-body shake of anxiety before the in-flight meal service? I've been promised a full restaurant-style dining, and I was determined to enjoy it on pain of death, particularly as I'd already ordered my main course in advance, and it was even printed on my boarding card. However, I surprised the crew, who had just finished up cleaning up the cabin, and pretty much everybody had gone to sleep, except me, who was wide awake. After blinking twice at the request for dinner, they asked if I'd just like the mains, but I was determined to try all the courses, as the menu said there was full dining on demand, at which point the crew said they might need to wake up another crew member, and it might be some time as they needed to start the entire first-class service again, just for me. Now, the crew surprised me by offering an amuse-bouche, the French term for mouth amuser, this bite-sized horse d'azur. Qatar carried on with the French chef tradition that they're not ordered from the menu, but according to the chef's selection alone. I have absolutely no idea what it was, but it was great. The balls seemed to have some sort of beetroot in them, and there was something fishy about the cake. That's as far as I got. Then moved on to the soup of the day, which was lightly curried lentil and pumpkin, which is very good if you like that kind of thing. Next course, a traditional appetizer with a choice of caviar, meze, wagyu beef, or I went for the crunchy duck confit croquettes with hoisin sauce. A Cantonese speciality, but yeah, a bit of an acquired taste. I worked my way through the wine, and the William Firth Chablis 2016 was a standout for its juicy citrus fruits and ginger flavours, and retails for a 3-figure sum. However, the Blind River Sauvignon Blanc was a standard 10 quid at Tesco bottle. All redeemed by the Keller Riesling 2020, a bone-dry wine made from the upper and steeper parts of the vineyard, and indeed the priciest white on the list. However, everything fell apart at this point. The crew apologised as they'd served my reserved main course to another passenger while I was asleep on what they felt were the quite reasonable grounds that, well, I was snoring, so I'd rejected dinner. I was even less impressed that there were only a couple of options left, so I plumped for the seared wagyu beef tenderloin with masman curry fried rice and garlic pak choy. It's kind of a steak with orange curry dressing over chunky rice. And it's absolutely brilliant. My tongue decided to fall in love with my taste buds, and I quite metaphorically thought I'd died and gone to some aviation heaven. Of course, having the tenderloin, I was forced to check out the red, purely in the name of research, you understand. Now, the Tuscany Montecillo 2011 was very earthy, with notes of leather and mushroom, and $500 down Dan Murphy. Whereas the Australian Two Hands Shiraz is only about $20. Good though, hints of plum and black fruit. absolute standout is the Bordeaux St. Julien 2008. Now this is a red wine from Medoc, and it's got a lovely aromatic bouquet and is enhanced by notes of cedar and spices reflecting the terroir. For the encore, I swapped to the cheese plate to cleanse my palate with 4 of the best cheeses I've had in a very long time, and the bread basket swapped for Grenex, Lavash and condiments. To complete the set of checking out every bottle in the wine cellar, I tried the dessert wine. There's a pedestrian 20-year-old tawny port of a thick, treacly Chateaubriand Sauternes 2010. Lush, frisky and full-bodied. It's fantastic. I then had to swap on to a sweet to finish with a filled chocolate lava cake with sweet potato cream, blueberries and almond crumbs. Certainly eating dinner on Qatar is something I'll never live to regret. Although after having ploughed through that lot over 3 hours, I think I conclusively proved that frequent travel broadens more than the mind. Now, just to get my circulation going, I took another wander through the darkened mysteries of business class back to the lounge again, which was predictably deserted, and the crew immediately offered me some canapes to starve off the hunger on my long trek from the front of the plane to the back. Instead, the only sane option I could think of was an old-fashioned cocktail to help my digestion. Not surprisingly, as we headed towards Australia, I was starting to feel a little drained. So drained, in fact, it made me feel like my brain was leaking out of my ears. However, morning had broken, rather like my spirit for staying awake, even though the rest of the cabin was just getting ready for breakfast. So it was time to raise that vast privacy divider again, which crawled up at the speed of an asthmatic ant, lower the window blinds with that special button that lowers all 3 in one go, and get my snooze on. And there is a seat in bed mode, no mattress provider on this flight, and it's much, much less private than Emirates or Singapore in first class, but needs must, and I suppose it does the job. There we go, just over 4 hours till we get to Sydney. So I swiped the remote to discover I was flying over the coast of Australia from the UK for the 14th time this year. Yeah, frequent travel, nothing like it for getting through lots of box sets of TV shows I never knew I wanted to watch. If only the remote for the in-flight entertainment actually worked properly. It was decidedly unresponsive. It could tell me where I was, but after that point just seized up and the whole entertainment system failed to function. It's not my brain at this point, I'm starting to get a bit tired. So I wandered up to the in-flight orchid garden to wake up again after the second coming of sleep from this flight on that lovely comfortable pillow. I got to know it so well. And found the hidden drawer where the crew kept the amenities, brushed my teeth and came to, of course, the logical conclusion for what I needed to drink next. A nice cup of tea, starting with a pot of English breakfast in a proper teapot. I didn't really get a chance to show you the small wardrobe-like compartment where I could hang my clothes once I'd changed into my Qatar-branded pyjamas. There was enough space for shoes and a small bag, whereas bigger bags go into the large cupboard up front. No mucking about with a tiny overhead bin in first. Oh no, this wardrobe could hold a small child, lion, witch and the lands of Narnia. Anyway, I digress. There we go, Australia coming into sight. Where's the champagne? And I know what goes well with champagne as I lower the privacy divider and lie back on that larger, wider bed in first while we head over the Simpson Desert of Australia that's frying in 45 degrees. Yup, perfect accompaniment. I need some English afternoon tea. Now, it's a very good English custom, though the weather be cold or hot. When you need a little pickup, you'll find a little teacup will always hit the spot. But goodness, the crew were a bit lackadaisical about serving afternoon tea the way it should be, and again offered me a breakfast omelette. No thanks, I've had it before. Far better than breakfast for getting your body clock in order, the afternoon tea on Qatar could come straight from an English country house in the Cotswolds. The afternoon tea has 3 finger sandwiches, all with the crust cut off, as they should, and includes cucumber sandwiches, egg and cress, and smoked salmon. There are 2 warm scones with Cornish clotted cream and strawberry jam, and 2 lovely pastries, a chocolate puff filled with cream and sponge cake topped with cherry jam. And of course, since the cream came from Cornwall, I had to have it in a way that divides those over the Tamar, by having the cream on top of the jam.
Well, there we go. That's a famous first-class service on Qatar Airways A380, but quite frankly, I'm not impressed. To have to wait an hour for any food to be delivered, no amenity kits unless you request them, and to have, well, quite frankly, sloppy service. Yeah, if this is it, I'm going back to business class.
Now, don't get me wrong, the food is great, and on Qatar I particularly love having the flexibility to dine on demand. But the crew just won't get up for this. They wanted to serve all the meals in one go at their set times, and it was quite clear that it was a massive imposition for them to have to cater for those in first who order a meal out of sequence. However, well-versed flyers in premium cabins will actively avoid eating breakfast on a plane, as it can be a letdown, especially when it comes to eggs, so I wanted to try something different. I just didn't imagine it would take so long. Anyway, Australia is 8 hours ahead of Doha, and we were due to land in Sydney around 6 o'clock the following day, so I decided I'd try to ease the jet lag a bit by sleeping and eating to Australian time by heading to the pub again. Now, I'd waited until I'd eaten breakfast, tea, and woken up properly before I ventured through the business class cabin again and into the huge onboard bar. It's available to business and first class passengers, and really scarcely anybody visited it for the whole of the flight. Bar is fully stocked, serving everything from a glass of wine to specialty cocktails and Woodford Reserve whiskey. However, as the 300 quid a bottle Millesime 2006 champagne was reserved for first class passengers and therefore not served at the bar, I made sure to maximise my first class experience by heading back to the first class cabin for bubbly refills and then walking back to the bar to drink it. And then I hit the cocktail list. Had a Bombay Collins and then tried a Cuba Libre, basically Coke and rum. And finally I wanted to check out the drinks on the business class menu. Back in the cheap seats they serve Chilean Oro Sauvignon Blanc. It's about 7 quid in Tesco's, but a good one with bright acidity and flavours of citrus, green apple and honeysuckle. I tried a couple more cocktails. There's a pineapple wine cooler and a Bacardi daiquiri on the list, and then to get to the front of the plane I went downstairs and took a pleasant afternoon walk through steerage to see how those less fortunate than me were faring. Not well, it looked like. Economy was in darkness and some of those passengers clearly had got a bit of a grump on. Still, there we go, back up that lovely wide staircase and into my seat, and I felt I really wasn't getting enough for my money in first. After all, I wanted complete redemption. However, after I'd got the tray table out and looked at the menu, I found the galley had pretty much run out of food. The only options left were the healthy metabolism booster salad with kale, not really in the mood for rabbit food, or chicken coconut curry with tadka rice and mixed vegetables. Yum! It took another hour or so to arrive though, and we were running perilously close to the time where we'd have to close up the cabin. I had yet more champagne to go with it, I'm certainly not going to be turning that down, but then the crew said they'd run out of champagne. I had to delve into the wine list to deal with this nightmare, and the only real options left were that cheap bottle of blind driven Sauvignon Blanc. Still, another 3 glasses of that, and by the time I got to the bottom of that bottle, it was starting to taste almost drinkable. I tried the Wi-Fi again, but the speed remained woeful. Now compare that to the decent Wi-Fi I was getting from Paris Charles de Gaulle to Doha on the Qatar 777. That was fast enough to stream from the iPlayer and Netflix onto my phone and plug that into the HDMI port so I could watch streaming films on the big seatback screen. Equally, the service in first had crawled to a juddering halt. An hour later, as we were 20 minutes from landing, my plate of curry was still left at the table.
So things improved, but still 2 hours after I had my dinner, or lunch, or breakfast. I've no idea which one it is. My tray table still hasn't been cleared.
Finally, at long last, the crew began a very slow tidy up of the first class cabin with just 20 minutes until we landed at Sydney Airport. And eventually, my plate was cleared and I could put away the tray table. The purser came round to my seat and apologised for the length of time it took to remove the debris. However, she tried to justify this by saying that they were flying with 2 less crew than normal, so they had to operate the first class cabin as a kind of add-on to the business class cabin. Yeah.
Preparation for landing, please place your hand luggage in the overhead storage compartment around the seats in front of you. Ensure that your seat bag is...
As an excuse, that's a rubbish name for a long trunk pachyderm. Surely first is first. And their elephant, or rather a whale of a way to deal with the whale of the A380, was to do meal servings in 2 batches, which is how come they've been so busy in the last 2 hours of the flight, dealing with breakfast in business, and that's why they were so busy when I woke up, trying to get breakfast out of the way in first. It's the type of ideal elephant you couldn't see with a microscope, if you forgive my metaphors as jumbled as my brain. So how did I find the Qatar A380 in first class, other than the A380 being parked under a gate where I left it earlier in Doha? Well, this was a rare and somewhat time-sensitive opportunity to try out this experience. In fact, Qatar Airways A380 first class is an aspirational airline product that I honestly thought I'd never see again. That's because Qatar Airways had retired their fleet of Airbus A380s during the pandemic, but they hurriedly and unexpectedly brought them back to accommodate the sheer numbers of passengers they needed to fly. And since it has first class, the airline sort of is offering it as well. Now, to put first class into perspective, the cash price of my ticket totaled north of $10,000 one way. Yeah, over $6,000 in sterling. Well, it would do if I was going to be paying for it, but I wasn't that mad, although my sanity is debatable. No, instead I redeemed a load of Avios to upgrade to first with a paid business class ticket, and I'm glad I did, as most parts of the experience are truly amazing. I had access to the Qatar Airways Al Safwa first class lounge at Doha, which ranks as one of the world's best first class lounges, even if it's rather like a museum crossed with a mausoleum. Anyway, at least I managed to cross over the underground river and get onto my A380s and see the first class seat, which, I found, isn't first in class, but it sort of does the job. It meant I was able to go to sleep immediately after takeoff and then begin adjusting to the new time zone by eating upon waking a few hours later. Now, the onboard food is amazing, the wines are top notch, and with the kind of wine you may end up paying thousands for in a top restaurant.
For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the aircraft is completely stopped and the seatbelt sign is switched off. Please take care when opening overhead storage compartment and ensure that you have all your personal belongings and travel documents with you as you disembark the aircraft. Remember that smoking is not permitted until you are within a designated smoking area. Thank you for choosing to fly with Qatar Airways and the One World Alliance. It has been a pleasure taking care of you today.
Anyway, I do wish Qatar would treat first class as something other than a temporary pop-up first class that will be gone in a year or two, and there's no point in really staffing properly.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sydney. The local time is 6:45 in the evening.
At least the A380 had landed on time in Sydney, and I was out of the airport in 15 minutes. I took the train to Central Station and then hopped on a tram to Circular Quay. At Circular Quay, I had a look at the boats, the Opera House, and indeed, of course, that very big bridge. Then took another train back past Central to head for the main reason I was here in Sydney for a few hours, to visit a tourist attraction that had been wowing the Australian drinkers since it opened recently. It really is a destination of choice in Sydney, even if it's in an old train shed. It meant taking a tram and then a train and finally to the old train shed, which is now a pub where I could start the evening with a couple of evening pints. Its name? Well, it's an obscure pub chain, but it's been wowing Sydney since it opened one branch here. It's called Brewdog. Incidentally, I do hope you've been keeping up with the unusual drinking game I know many of you viewers like to do on this flight, where you have to match drink for drink every glass I've slowly been sipping. If you have been, please wring out your liver now and hang it on the line to dry.